C'est décarré, Enlève, le rancher s'approche, et restait choqué. The morning sun had just begun to rise over the wide, open plains of the ranch. Golden rays stretched across the fields, lighting up the tall grasses that swayed gently in the soft breeze. For most people, it would have seemed like a peaceful, ordinary morning. But for the rancher, every day on the land was a mixture of hard work, routine, and unexpected surprises. He had spent decades caring for this land, tending to the animals and keeping everything in order. Every fence, every gate, and every animal held a story, and he knew the rhythms of the ranch like the back of his hand. This morning was no different in appearance. The rooster crowed from the edge of the barn, and somewhere in the distance, a cow lowed, calling to its calf. The rancher stepped out of the old wooden house, boots crunching on the gravel path, and took a deep breath. The air was crisp, filled with the faint smell of earth and dew. He loved these quiet moments before the day became busy, when he could walk the land and observe everything carefully. As he walked along the familiar paths, checking the fences and the gates, his eyes scanned the fields. He had always been a man who noticed small changes. A missing fence post, a different footprint in the mud, or a new patch of grass could tell him more than anyone else could understand. Today, however, something caught his eye that did not belong in the usual rhythm of the ranch. Near the old hangar at the far edge of the property, something unusual moved in the wind. At first, he thought it was just a torn piece of cloth, maybe something blown away by the wind from a nearby farm. But as he got closer, his curiosity turned into caution. The object didn't behave like a normal piece of fabric. It seemed heavier, more irregular, and the way it hung made it look strange against the backdrop of the morning light. He squinted to get a better look, his seasoned eyes narrowing in focus. The rancher had faced many surprises over the years. Animals had wandered where they shouldn't, storms had damaged fences, and wildlife often came closer than expected. But there was something about this object that made him pause. He stopped a few steps away, resting his hands on his knees, and tried to make sense of it. The wind blew again, causing the object to sway slightly, and a strange sound came from it. It was not a normal rustle of fabric. There was something wet, something alive perhaps, that made the rancher instinctively take a small step back. He adjusted his hat, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead, and thought about what to do next. The rancher knew that hesitation could be dangerous, but so could rushing in without thinking. He had learned over the years that the ranch demanded patience as much as action. Every decision could affect the animals, the land, or even himself. Taking a deep breath, he reminded himself to stay calm and alert. The closer he moved, the clearer it became that this was not an ordinary object. There was a smell, faint but unmistakable, that made his stomach twist slightly. He had dealt with sick animals before, with rotting hay, and with wildlife that left signs on the property, but this smell was different. It was stronger, sharper, and carried a hint of urgency. Something had gone wrong, and he could feel it deep down. He approached slowly, his boots crunching on the gravel, trying not to startle whatever might be there. The object was hanging from a low branch of a tree, caught in the twisted limbs and torn in several places. He could see the sunlight catching on its edges, highlighting the damage. It looked as though it had been through a struggle. The rancher's heart began to beat a little faster. He was no stranger to difficult situations, but the sight of something damaged, something caught, always brought a sense of responsibility. He had to understand what it was before it caused more harm. The rancher moved carefully closer, one step at a time. He could see now that it was made of a material he recognized, a kind of canvas used for equipment or coverings on the ranch. But the way it was twisted and torn made him wonder how it had gotten there. He reached out a cautious hand, ready to pull it down, when the wind shifted, making the object sway more violently. He flinched instinctively. That movement revealed a small part of what had been hidden, something inside that looked like it might need help. At that moment, memories of past incidents on the ranch rushed through his mind. He remembered the time a calf had been trapped in a fence, the time a wild animal had gotten into the barn, and the time a tree branch had nearly crushed the old wagon. In every situation, careful observation and quick thinking had saved the day. He knew that rushing blindly could make things worse. He had to be smart, precise, and calm. He looked around quickly, scanning the surroundings. The ranch was quiet, almost eerily so. The birds had stopped singing, and the usual sounds of the animals seemed muted. There was a tension in the air that he could feel in his bones. He crouched slightly, keeping a safe distance, and studied the object carefully. It looked torn, battered, and out of place, but there was a glimmer of life or movement that made him cautious. Finally, the rancher decided he had no choice but to take action. His instincts told him that leaving it alone could make the situation worse, and he could not ignore the possibility that an animal, or even a person, might be in danger. He reached for a long stick to probe gently, testing the object from a safe distance. The movement confirmed what he had suspected. There was indeed something alive, something struggling, and it needed immediate attention. As he prepared to get closer, he reminded himself to stay calm and methodical. He had faced emergencies before, but the mix of fear, curiosity, and responsibility made this moment tense. Every step forward had to be measured. He could feel his heart pounding, but his mind stayed sharp. He adjusted his gloves, took a steadying breath, and stepped into position to handle the situation carefully. The morning sun continued to climb, casting long shadows across the field. The rancher's shadow stretched alongside him as he moved. Each step felt heavier than the last, filled with anticipation and the weight of responsibility. He could hear the faint rustle of the canvas, the irregular movements inside, and the quiet sounds that confirmed he was about to discover something unexpected, something that could change the course of his day or his life. And then, in that moment, he realized that what he had assumed was just a piece of torn canvas was actually a small part of a larger problem. The realization made him pause, his mind racing through possibilities, each one more serious than the last. He could feel the tension building, the kind of tension that comes before a critical decision, the kind of moment that would be remembered long after the incident was over. The rancher took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he was about to do. He knew that in a few moments he would have to act decisively. The situation demanded courage, calm thinking, and care. One wrong move could cause harm, one right move could prevent disaster. He tightened his grip on the stick, adjusted his stance, and prepared to reveal the truth behind the torn canvas, not knowing exactly what he would find but ready to face it head-on. The morning air seemed to hold its breath with him as he moved closer. His eyes narrowed, scanning for any sign of danger, any sign of life, any clue about what had happened. And as he reached the final step, just before touching the torn object, a faint sound reached his ears, a sound that made him freeze for a moment. It was a soft, struggling noise, a sound of something trapped and desperate. In that instant, the rancher knew he was no longer dealing with an ordinary object. The moment of realization hit him with full force. This was a situation that demanded action, courage, and immediate attention. The calm morning had disappeared, replaced by a pulse of tension and urgency. And as he prepared to act, a shiver ran down his spine, because he had no idea exactly what he would find when he finally removed the torn canvas and faced the truth. The rancher's hands trembled slightly as he reached toward the torn canvas, his heart beating fast. He had been through many unexpected events on the ranch, but this moment felt different. It wasn't just a broken fence or a wandering animal this time. There was a sense of urgency in the air, a tension that made his stomach tighten. Every instinct in his body screamed that he had to act carefully but quickly. He slowly lifted one corner of the torn material. The wind caught it and made it flutter, revealing a small shape underneath. At first, he could not tell exactly what it was. It seemed small, fragile, and covered in dirt and debris. The rancher crouched lower, bringing himself closer to the object, his eyes scanning every detail. As he moved closer, he realized that this was no ordinary item left behind or blown by the wind. There was life here, faint but undeniable. A soft whimper reached his ears. The sound was quiet, almost as if it were being muffled by the fabric, but it was enough to make him freeze. He held his breath and listened carefully. Another faint noise, a tiny movement, made his heart jump. Whatever was under that torn canvas was alive, and it was in trouble. He felt a mixture of fear and determination. He had to help it, whatever it was. With extreme care, he began lifting the canvas completely. As he did, the figure beneath came into view. His eyes widened in shock. It was smaller than he had expected, covered in dirt, tangled in the torn material, and shivering from either cold or fear, or both. The rancher immediately noticed the bruises and scratches on its body. Clearly, it had been struggling, trying to free itself, and now it was exhausted. The rancher's mind raced. What had caused this? How had it ended up here, trapped and hurt? He glanced around the area looking for clues. The hangar nearby was old, abandoned in places with broken planks and rusty nails. Perhaps the figure had been caught in the structure somehow, or maybe it had been wandering across the ranch and stumbled into the wrong place at the wrong time. Every possibility ran through his mind, but he focused on the most important thing, the immediate need to help. Carefully, he reached down, avoiding sudden movements that might scare the small figure. As his hands touched it gently, he realized it was warm despite being dirty and trembling. Relief mixed with concern, and he whispered softly to calm it. His voice was low and steady, carrying a sense of reassurance. He had learned over the years that creatures respond to tone and presence. The tiny whimpers began to slow slightly, and the figure looked up at him with wide eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. The rancher's eyes met those frightened eyes, and something deep inside him stirred. He had encountered animals and even people in distress before, but there was something about this moment that felt intensely personal. It was a reminder that life could be fragile, and that courage often meant acting even when you weren't entirely sure of the outcome. He held the figure closer, supporting its weight, and tried to assess its condition. The more he looked, the more he realized how delicate the situation was. There were scratches and minor wounds, and patches of dirt and debris clung to its small frame. The rancher gently brushed some of it away, careful not to hurt it further. He could see that it had been struggling for hours, maybe even longer, and the exhaustion showed in every movement it made. His mind went through every possible step to help. He needed to get it somewhere safe, warm, and clean, and he had to do it without causing additional stress or injury. As he held it, he noticed subtle signs that made his concern deepen. Its breathing was uneven, a mix of rapid gasps and pauses, showing it was still frightened and probably in pain. The rancher's heart ached at the sight, but he kept his focus. Panic would not help either of them. He carefully lifted the figure, supporting it against his chest, and began moving toward the old barn nearby. The barn, though aged, was dry and relatively sheltered, a place where he could examine the figure safely and figure out what to do next. Every step he took was measured and cautious. He could feel the small body trembling against him, and he whispered gentle words again, hoping to provide comfort. The wind rustled the tall grasses around him, and the morning sun was now higher in the sky, casting warm light on the field. But the beauty of the morning contrasted sharply with the intensity of the situation. The rancher's mind remained focused entirely on the figure in his arms. Finally, he reached the barn. Its wooden doors creaked as he pushed them open, and he set the figure down carefully on a pile of soft hay. The contrast between the cold outside and the warmth of the barn was immediate, and the small figure began to calm slightly. The rancher crouched beside it, taking a moment to observe carefully. He could see now that it was a young animal, weak and exhausted, but alive. Its eyes, though still fearful, seemed to register trust in his presence. He examined the wounds closely. None were life-threatening, but they were serious enough that immediate care was necessary. There were scratches and small cuts, and some dirt was embedded in its fur or skin. The rancher gently cleaned the area with a soft cloth and water, careful not to cause pain. Every movement had to be deliberate and calm. He was patient, talking softly all the while, and gradually the figure's breathing began to slow and steady. The rancher could not help but reflect on how easily accidents and misfortune could occur in a place like this. The ranch was wide and open, full of hidden dangers, and he knew that creatures often wandered into trouble without anyone realizing. This moment reminded him of the importance of vigilance, care, and compassion. It also reminded him of the responsibility he held over the land and everything living on it. As he worked, he thought about what might have happened earlier. Perhaps the figure had been lost or separated from its family. Maybe it had been caught in the old hangar by accident. Or perhaps it had wandered too far from safety and had no way to protect itself. Each possibility made him more determined to help. He could not change what had happened, but he could make a difference now. Time passed slowly, and the rancher continued to care for the small figure. He offered it food and water, but it was hesitant, unsure of what to trust. Patience was key. He stayed beside it, keeping a calm presence, and gradually the figure began to eat and drink, gaining strength. The rancher's relief was immense, but he remained cautious. He knew recovery would take time and care. Throughout this process, he observed its behavior closely. It flinched at sudden movements, but its eyes now followed him with a quiet curiosity. It began to explore the hay cautiously, testing the safety of its surroundings. The rancher's careful guidance and steady demeanor made a difference. Slowly, he could see it regaining energy, and with each passing minute, the fear in its eyes lessened. He also thought about the future. The figure might need more than just temporary care. Perhaps it required medical attention, or maybe it needed to be reunited with its family or herd. But for now, the immediate concern was safety, warmth, and comfort. The rancher had handled emergencies before, but this situation carried a new weight, a sense of responsibility to protect a vulnerable life from the unknown dangers of the world. By midday, the barn had transformed into a small sanctuary. The rancher had cleared away debris, laid fresh hay, and ensured the space was secure. The figure, now more alert, looked around with cautious interest, sensing that this was a safe place. The rancher stepped back for a moment and allowed himself to breathe. Relief washed over him, but he remained watchful. He knew that even when danger seemed to have passed, care and attention were never-ending. The morning had started quietly, with nothing to suggest the extraordinary events that had unfolded. But now, as the rancher watched the small figure settle into the warmth of the barn, he understood how quickly life could change. One torn object, one overlooked detail had led to this dramatic discovery. It was a reminder that vigilance, empathy, and decisive action could make all the difference between tragedy and survival. The rancher sat quietly beside the small figure, his hands resting gently on his knees. The barn was warm and safe, but outside, the wind continued to whisper through the trees and across the open fields. The quiet was deceptive. He knew that even with the immediate danger gone, challenges were not over. Every experience on the ranch had taught him that calm moments were often the prelude to new difficulties. He could feel that this situation was no different. The figure was slowly gaining strength, but it remained wary. Its small eyes followed every movement the rancher made, watching him with a mix of curiosity and caution. Every twitch of a leaf outside or the creak of the barn doors made it flinch slightly. The rancher understood its fear. He had seen similar reactions in many animals over the years. Some had been abandoned, some injured, and some simply afraid of humans. Patience, he knew, would be the key to earning trust. But as he sat there, the rancher's mind was not at rest. He had to make a decision. The figure might need more than his immediate care. He wondered if it required medical attention or if it had a family somewhere on the ranch. The thought of trying to locate it or help it recover was daunting. The barn was safe for now, but it was not a permanent solution. He felt a surge of responsibility pressing on him. He had rescued it from immediate danger, yes, but what next? The dilemma weighed heavily on him. If he took it to a vet or a wildlife expert, he would be leaving the ranch, even for a short time. There was a risk that the figure might panic or become further stressed. On the other hand, staying in the barn meant limited resources and limited safety in case something else went wrong. He thought about the stories he had heard from neighbors, tales of animals rescued but lost because of fear or injury. He did not want this life, small and fragile, to be lost despite his help. He leaned back against the wooden wall of the barn, his eyes scanning the fields beyond the open doors. The morning sun had climbed higher, lighting the landscape in bright, warm colors. The peaceful scene outside contrasted sharply with the tension inside. The rancher knew that appearances could be misleading. What looked like a calm day could hide dangers he could not yet see. He also knew that he had to act decisively. Indecision might cost more than careful action ever could. The small figure shifted, attempting to move, testing the boundaries of the hay bed it had made. It seemed curious but hesitant. The rancher noticed its movements carefully. They were cautious, small steps, testing his reaction. He smiled faintly, understanding that this was a natural process. Trust did not come instantly, it had to be earned, and he was willing to earn it piece by piece through patience and consistent care. As he considered his options, he thought about the dangers that still lurked. The ranch was not empty. There were predators, wild animals, snakes, and even the occasional stray dog. A sudden noise or intrusion could alarm the small figure, causing it to panic or injure itself further. The thought made his jaw tighten. He had to balance immediate safety with long-term recovery. It was a delicate situation, and any mistake could have serious consequences. The rancher decided that observation was the first step. He would watch the figure for several hours, see how it responded to care, and then determine the next course of action. He gathered some soft cloths and a small bucket of clean water, preparing to tend to its minor wounds again. He spoke softly, using a calm tone to reassure it. Slowly, the figure began to respond, dipping its tiny head toward the water, drinking in small sips. The rancher's heart lifted slightly. Progress was small but meaningful. Even as he cared for it, his mind raced with questions. How did it end up caught in that torn canvas? Had it been abandoned, lost, or was it separated from a parent or guardian? The more he thought about it, the more he realized how many unknowns existed. The ranch had seen storms, accidents, and wandering animals, but this incident felt unusual. Something about it did not fit the normal patterns he knew. He wondered if he would ever know the full story. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise outside the barn. The rancher's body tensed immediately, his years of experience telling him to be alert. A branch snapped in the wind, or maybe an animal moved nearby. He could not tell. The small figure flinched, backing slightly into the corner of the hay bed. The rancher's voice rose gently, calm but firm, reassuring it that everything was safe. Slowly, the tension in its small body eased. The incident reminded him that the world outside was unpredictable. Even within the safety of the barn, there were variables he could not control. The realization made the dilemma even more pressing. He had to provide a secure environment, but he also needed to think ahead. The small figure could not stay in the barn indefinitely. It needed nourishment, exercise, and possibly medical attention. Every passing moment required him to weigh risks and benefits carefully. As the hours passed, the rancher became more attuned to the figure's needs. He offered it small pieces of food, and cautiously it began to eat. He cleaned its wounds again, making sure nothing was missed. He checked the hay for any hidden dangers, ensuring that the small space was completely safe. Every detail mattered. The rancher's attention to detail, honed over years of ranch life, was crucial in these moments. One wrong step could undo all the care he had provided. By midday, he realized that the figure was gaining strength but also showing signs of curiosity. It began to move more confidently, exploring the hay bed and the corners of the barn. The rancher's heart swelled with relief. The small creature was responding positively, indicating that his careful approach was working. Yet he knew this was only the beginning. Recovery would take time, and trust had to be maintained consistently. He could not let down his guard. The dilemma became more pronounced as he considered the next steps. The rancher knew that it might need to return to its natural environment or be reunited with its family. He also understood that transporting it could be dangerous if done improperly. He thought about calling a wildlife expert or veterinarian, but he was unsure how the small figure would react. Panic during transport could cause injury or stress, undoing hours of careful work. The rancher weighed the options, realizing that patience and timing would be key. Even as he planned, the small figure began to respond more to his presence. It approached him cautiously, sniffing at his hands, and for the first time allowed itself to rest against him briefly. The rancher's heart lifted. This simple act of trust was monumental. It meant that he could proceed with future steps, whether seeking professional help or moving it to a safer location on the ranch. Trust had been earned, and with it came responsibility. The rancher reflected on his own feelings. He felt a mixture of pride, relief, and ongoing concern. Moments like these reminded him why he had dedicated his life to the ranch and the care of living creatures. Every day brought challenges, and every challenge required courage and quick thinking. This incident, while intense, reinforced the importance of vigilance, compassion, and decisive action. He understood that life on the ranch was unpredictable, but that preparation and empathy could make all the difference. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, he continued to watch the small figure. It was stronger now, moving with more confidence but still cautious. Every rustle outside or creak of the barn doors caused it to pause and assess. The rancher remained near, offering comfort and guidance. He knew that recovery was not just about physical care, it was also about emotional security. Providing a calm, safe environment was as important as cleaning wounds or offering food. By evening, he had made some decisions. The figure would remain in the barn for the night, protected from the cool air outside and the potential dangers of the open ranch. He would continue to monitor it, providing food, water, and gentle reassurance. Tomorrow, he would consider options for its long-term care, whether that meant reuniting it with family or seeking professional help. The dilemma had not vanished, but he had taken steps to manage it effectively. The rancher leaned back against the barn wall, exhausted but satisfied with the progress made. The small figure rested nearby, curled up in the hay, safe for the first time since the morning. He knew that challenges were still ahead, but for now he allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The day had begun as ordinary, but it had transformed into a test of skill, patience, and compassion. He had faced the dilemma head-on, and he had acted with care. In the fading light of the afternoon, the barn felt calm. The rancher watched as the small figure rested, breathing slowly and evenly. He knew that tomorrow would bring more decisions, more careful steps, and more challenges. But he also knew that he had made the right choices so far. The barn, the hay, and his presence had created a sanctuary in which life could recover and trust could grow. The next morning, the rancher woke before sunrise, as he always did. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of earth and dew. The quiet of the early hour felt different this time, almost heavy, as if the ranch itself sensed that something important was about to happen. He moved carefully through the barn, checking on the small figure that had now begun to move around more confidently, though still with a cautious air. It was alert, its eyes tracking every shadow and sound, a mixture of curiosity and wariness. The rancher knew today would be different. He could no longer simply wait and observe. While the figure had gained strength overnight, the challenges of the day ahead demanded action. He had thought carefully about the options. Leaving it in the barn indefinitely was not sustainable, and the longer it remained trapped or isolated, the more stress it would endure. Something had caused this situation, and he needed to confront it, whatever that might be. He decided to start by examining the surroundings outside the barn. Carefully, he stepped into the morning light, boots crunching softly on the gravel, and looked around the area where he had first discovered the torn canvas. The wind had shifted overnight, leaving faint traces of tracks in the soft soil. He studied them carefully. They were small and irregular, not entirely human, not entirely animal, an enigma that made his brow furrow. The rancher's experience told him that these tracks were important. They might reveal what had happened and help prevent further danger. As he followed the faint trail, he kept the small figure close, carrying it gently in his arms. He whispered calming words, encouraging it to stay calm as they moved. Every snap of a twig or rustle of grass made the small figure tense, but the rancher's steady voice seemed to reassure it. The path led toward the old hangar, the same place where the torn canvas had first caught his attention. The rancher's mind raced with possibilities. Was it a wild animal, a human intruder, or just an accident of nature? He could not know for sure yet, but he had to be prepared for anything. Approaching the hangar, he slowed his pace. The morning sun shone on the structure, revealing the damaged wood and bent nails more clearly than before. The torn canvas still hung, fluttering weakly in the breeze. As he studied it, he noticed something he had not seen yesterday, deeper scratches on the wooden walls, evidence of a struggle. His heart raced. This was no ordinary mishap. Something significant had happened here, and he was about to confront it. He set the small figure down gently on a soft patch of grass nearby, ensuring it could observe but stay safe. Then, with careful, deliberate movements, he stepped closer to the hangar. Every muscle in his body was alert, ready to react to whatever might emerge. The rancher had faced many dangers in his life, wild animals, storms, and accidents, but this situation felt uniquely tense. The unknown factor, combined with the faint signs of struggle, created a pulse of urgency that he could not ignore. Inside the hangar, the light was dim, and dust motes floated lazily in the air. He could see shadows dancing along the walls, and the faint smell of damp wood and earth filled the space. His eyes adjusted slowly, searching for any sign of movement. Then he noticed it, a small shape curled up behind an old barrel, partially hidden in shadow. His breath caught. It moved slightly, and he realized it was the same type of creature as the one he had rescued. But there were differences. This one appeared weaker, tangled in some debris, struggling to stay upright. The rancher took a slow step forward, keeping his hands visible and moving in gentle gestures. He knew that sudden movements could startle the figure and make the situation worse. "It's okay," he whispered, a soft, steady reassurance. The creature's eyes flicked toward him, wide with fear. His instincts told him to act quickly but carefully. He could not leave it there. The hangar was unstable, full of hazards that could injure it further. He reached into the debris, careful to avoid any sudden movements, and began to free the figure. It flinched initially, but gradually allowed him to lift it out. The rancher noticed more scratches and bruises this time, more serious than the first. It was clear that this creature had been trapped for a longer period and had struggled against whatever had ensnared it. His mind raced. What could have caused this, and how many more might be in danger nearby? The rancher carried the second figure outside, placing it near the first one in a safe, sunny spot. Both creatures looked at each other cautiously, unsure whether to approach or retreat. He knelt nearby, offering water and speaking in soothing tones. It took time, but the second one began to calm, showing signs of trust. The rancher felt a sense of relief, but it was tempered by a lingering concern. Something had caused both of these creatures to be trapped or endangered, and he still did not know the full story. Suddenly, a sound came from the nearby trees, a rustle, a snap of a branch, subtle but unmistakable. The rancher froze, his eyes scanning the surroundings. Predators or other animals might be nearby, or perhaps it was something connected to the first incident. His heart pounded, and he instinctively positioned himself between the creatures and the direction of the sound. The small figures huddled behind him, sensing his alertness. The rancher's mind moved quickly, considering all possibilities. He knew that hesitation could lead to disaster. Carefully, he took a closer step toward the sound, making soft noises to identify the source. A small, frightened animal, a young fawn, tangled in some vines, emerged from the underbrush. It was weak and frightened, just like the others had been. The rancher's heart swelled with empathy. This was the moment that demanded action, decisiveness, and calm precision. He slowly approached the fawn, speaking in low, gentle tones. The fawn trembled, but it sensed that he meant no harm. With careful hands, he untangled the vines, working methodically to free it without causing additional stress. The fawn's movements were shaky, but it gradually regained balance. Once freed, it stood unsteadily on its legs, glancing at the rancher as if to understand what had just happened. The rancher guided it back to the safe area near the barn, joining the other creatures. All three were now together, their fear slowly giving way to trust. The rancher knew this was a crucial moment. He had acted decisively, confronting the hidden danger, and now he had prevented further harm. But he also knew that the work was not done. These creatures needed ongoing care, warmth, and protection to fully recover. As he observed them, the rancher reflected on the events of the past day and a half. The torn canvas, the hangar, and the signs of struggle all told a story of vulnerability and danger that he had narrowly uncovered. His quick thinking, patience, and courage had made the difference between life and continued suffering. Yet he realized that vigilance would always be necessary on a ranch like this. Nature could be beautiful, but it could also be unpredictable and dangerous. The rancher spent the remainder of the morning ensuring that the creatures were comfortable and safe. He cleared debris from the barn, laid down fresh hay, and provided food and water. The creatures explored cautiously, but began to show signs of relaxation. The rancher felt a quiet satisfaction. His actions had protected life, and he had prevented further harm. But he remained watchful, knowing that challenges were not over, that the ranch required constant care and attention. By midday, the barn had transformed from a quiet, ordinary space into a sanctuary. The creatures moved with increasing confidence, responding to his calm presence. The rancher took a moment to breathe, reflecting on the importance of action in the face of uncertainty. Every decision he had made, from the moment he discovered the torn canvas to rescuing the fawn, had required courage, patience, and care, and each decision had made a profound difference. The tension of the morning slowly eased, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and cautious optimism. The rancher knew that he had confronted danger, acted decisively, and created a safe environment for the vulnerable creatures. But he also understood that vigilance was ongoing. The ranch was alive with unpredictability, and his role was not only as a caretaker but as a protector. Each choice mattered. In the warm afternoon light, he watched as the three creatures settled together in the hay, safe for the first time since the incidents began. He knelt nearby, keeping a watchful eye, ready to intervene if necessary, but allowing them to explore and gain confidence. The rancher's heart was heavy with responsibility but light with relief. He had acted when it mattered most, and the result was life, safety, and the fragile beginnings of trust. The late afternoon sun cast long, golden shadows across the ranch, painting the fields in warm colors. The wind had softened to a gentle whisper, rustling the tall grasses and carrying the faint scent of wildflowers. Inside the barn, the three rescued creatures were slowly settling down, their small bodies relaxed now that they felt safe. The rancher sat nearby, leaning against the wooden wall, his hands resting on his knees. His mind was heavy with reflection, yet light with relief. Today had tested him, challenged him, and reminded him of the delicate balance of life on the ranch. He looked at the creatures, their eyes slowly closing as they rested, and he felt a profound sense of accomplishment. It had been a long and tense day, filled with unknown dangers and difficult decisions. Yet through patience, courage, and careful attention, he had managed to protect these lives and create a safe space for them. He realized that every moment of hesitation or indecision could have resulted in harm, but by acting thoughtfully and decisively, he had made a difference. The rancher thought about the events that had unfolded over the past 2 days. It had started with a torn canvas, something that seemed ordinary at first glance. But his curiosity and careful observation had revealed a deeper problem, a situation that could have ended tragically if he had ignored it. He smiled faintly, realizing how easily life could surprise you. A single overlooked detail, a small piece of debris, could hide a story of struggle, fear, and resilience. Today, he had been given the chance to intervene, to change the outcome, and he had seized it. As the evening sun dipped lower, the rancher began to plan the next steps. He knew that while the barn provided temporary safety, the creatures could not stay there forever. They would need nourishment, exercise, and eventually a return to their natural environment or proper care by a professional. He thought about the neighbors he could call for advice, the local wildlife experts who could provide guidance, and the possibilities of reuniting the animals with their families. Every option required careful consideration, patience, and empathy. Despite the work still ahead, the rancher allowed himself a quiet moment of reflection. He had always loved this land, loved the animals, and loved the rhythm of ranch life. But today had reminded him of something deeper, the importance of vigilance, compassion, and courage. Life on the ranch was unpredictable, full of challenges, and sometimes harsh. Yet it was also beautiful, full of small victories and moments of connection that could make the hardest days worthwhile. He leaned back, his eyes scanning the fields beyond the barn doors. The shadows of trees stretched across the landscape, and the soft murmur of a distant stream provided a calming soundtrack. He thought about the morning when he had first seen the torn canvas. At that moment, he had no idea what lay hidden, no idea how serious the situation would become. And now, after hours of careful attention, observation, and decisive action, he had uncovered a story of struggle, resilience, and survival. The rancher's thoughts turned inward. He considered his own feelings of fear, uncertainty, and determination. He had experienced many challenges on the ranch, but moments like these reminded him of the fragility of life and the importance of courage. The responsibility he felt was heavy, but it was accompanied by a sense of purpose. He realized that life often presents unexpected challenges, and the measure of a person is how they respond to them, with care, calmness, and decisive action. He glanced at the creatures again. The smallest one had curled up near the hay, its breathing steady and calm. The fawn, now recovering from its struggle in the vines, rested beside the others, its legs tucked carefully beneath its body. The third figure, the one first rescued from the hangar, blinked slowly, eyes reflecting a growing sense of trust. The rancher felt a wave of gratitude and relief. He had acted when it mattered most, and the result was life, safety, and the fragile beginnings of trust. As the sky darkened into deep shades of orange and purple, the rancher began to reflect on the lessons learned from the incident. He realized that vigilance, patience, and observation were more than just skills. They were tools that allowed him to prevent harm and foster life. Every detail mattered, from noticing the torn canvas to interpreting the subtle movements and sounds of the creatures. Small actions, careful decisions, and a steady presence had made a profound difference. He also considered the emotional side of the experience. Caring for these creatures had required empathy, understanding, and gentle guidance. It had reminded him that trust is fragile and must be earned through patience and consistency. The moments of fear, the hesitant glances, and the gradual steps toward comfort had shown him the resilience of life and the importance of human care and compassion. Each small victory, each sign of trust, was a testament to the power of attentive care. The rancher's thoughts drifted to the broader picture. Life on the ranch was full of surprises, and every day brought new challenges. Storms, accidents, wandering animals, and the unpredictable rhythms of nature demanded vigilance, courage, and adaptability. But amidst the uncertainty, there were moments of profound connection, moments when careful action could save a life, protect the vulnerable, and restore balance. Today had been one of those moments, and he carried the memory with gratitude. Night began to settle over the ranch, and the air cooled. The creatures had grown more comfortable, their movements slowing as they rested in the safety of the barn. The rancher took one last careful look around, ensuring the area was secure and free from hazards. He adjusted the hay to provide additional comfort, filled the water bucket, and spoke softly to reassure the creatures. He felt a sense of calm and satisfaction, knowing that he had done everything possible to protect them. As he stepped outside the barn to observe the final rays of the sun, the rancher reflected on the journey from morning to evening. The torn canvas, the initial discovery, the tense moments of uncertainty, and the careful rescue had all led to this point. He realized that life's challenges often present themselves unexpectedly, but with courage, careful observation, and patience, solutions can be found. Every life, no matter how small or vulnerable, deserved protection, and every action taken with care could have profound consequences. He stood quietly in the evening light, watching as the shadows lengthened across the fields. The ranch was alive with quiet sounds, the rustle of grass, the distant call of a bird, the gentle murmur of the wind. He felt a deep connection to the land and to the lives he had protected. The events of the day had tested him, challenged his instincts, and required careful thinking, but they had also reinforced his purpose and strengthened his sense of responsibility. The rancher knew that tomorrow would bring new decisions and new challenges, but he also knew that today had provided invaluable lessons. The creatures, now resting peacefully, had survived because of observation, patience, and decisive action. He had faced uncertainty and fear, acted with calm determination, and created a safe environment for life to recover. In that, he found pride, relief, and gratitude. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared in the sky, the rancher took a final glance inside the barn. The creatures had settled into the hay, their breathing steady and calm. He whispered a soft farewell for the night, knowing he would return in the morning to continue care and ensure their safety. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, understanding that vigilance, compassion, and courage had made all the difference. The rancher walked slowly back to his house, reflecting on the events of the day. Life on the ranch was unpredictable, full of challenges and surprises. Yet it was also full of opportunities for kindness, careful attention, and decisive action. The torn canvas that had seemed insignificant at first had revealed a story of struggle, resilience, and survival. By acting thoughtfully, the rancher had changed the outcome, turning fear and uncertainty into safety and trust. As he settled into his chair that night, listening to the quiet sounds of the rancher felt a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for life, for the opportunity to help, and for the lessons learned. He knew that challenges would continue to arise, but he also knew that careful observation, patience, and decisive action could make a real difference. The small victories, the moments of trust, and the lives protected were worth every moment of effort. The night was calm, and the ranch slept under the watchful gaze of the stars. The creatures rested safely, recovering from their ordeal, and the rancher felt a quiet pride in his actions. He had faced uncertainty, made difficult decisions, and acted with courage and care. In doing so, he had preserved life, fostered trust, and reinforced the connection between humanity and the natural world. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight was a night of reflection, gratitude, and peace. The rancher knew that life, in all its fragility and resilience, demanded attention and care. And as he closed his eyes, he carried with him the knowledge that one person's careful actions could create safety, trust, and hope, even in the face of uncertainty.